It's Lisa from Been There, Got Out, and I am very excited for tonight's guest. First, because we haven't done an Instagram Live in over a week because we were overseas in Colombia and having a great time. There she is. Okay. Anyway, so tonight's guest is Demetria Graves. She's an attorney, and she also is the host of Legally Uncensored podcast. And there she is.
Hi.
Hi, and I don't know if I told you this, Demetria, when we talked last, but I have a cousin who works as a paralegal in New York City,
Uh-huh.
and he was like, "Have you ever heard of this lawyer? Her name is Demetria Graves, and she's got this podcast." I was like, "Oh my God, we were just on." He was so
Oh,
impressed.
wow.
You're like this major celebrity in his law office.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank
So
you
East Coast,
for sharing that.
West Coast, East Coast. Yeah.
I'm bi-coastal. I like it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, Demetria, why don't you tell people a little bit about what you do, and then we'll get into our topic, which we changed slightly, which is still going to cover what I mentioned before, and it's going to be called Divorcing Toxic. But first, introduce
And I
yourself.
love that topic. So I first want to say thank you so much for having me. I am
Okay.
Demetria Graves. I am a family law attorney, a certified family law specialist in Pasadena, California. And just recently, I just started helping people understand what it means to divorce toxic exes, what that looks like. And I've been kind of touring myself with you and others talking about the topic, which I think is extremely important because there are so many moving pieces in divorce that you should know what you're getting yourself into.
Yeah. Now, what is a certified family specialist?
Certified family law
Law
specialist means
specialist.
I am certified by the State Bar of California as a specialist in the area of family law.
Ooh. Okay. So that's not just a family
No,
lawyer. Okay.
I'm more special, a special family lawyer.
Okay. Good. All right. Well, now you're going to get to strut your stuff. So let's talk about when people are in these toxic relationships. I know I myself was in one for 20 years. We don't know what abuse, especially if it's emotional, actually looks like. We just know that we're miserable. So as an attorney, like what you see, how would someone like me, how would somebody who's still in the relationship even realize that they're in a toxic situation?
I think when you start questioning if you are in a toxic relationship, it might be time to start getting help to determine if you are in one, right? Because typically if you're happy or even if, you're unhappy, you're not going to always go to, oh my God, this might be a toxic relationship. So if there, especially if there is physical, or if you've noticed an increase in emotional abuse, a lot of yelling, that sort of thing, that might be an indication that things are bad or worse than what they were before, and you should really seek, help. And so I tell everybody all the time that us divorce attorneys, we are not really equipped to diagnose people with whatever the issues are. So I think it's very important to go talk to someone to see if that is your situation.
Yeah, I mean, one of the big things that we see, and I recognize with myself, is denial,
Yeah.
because nobody gets married planning to get divorced, and we'll often do anything we can to keep the family intact. And I'm thinking recently we heard from somebody that the way that she realized it was a toxic relationship, a toxic marriage for decades, was that her kids came to her outside privately and said they're really worried about her and her safety.
Wow.
And that's what got her to finally make the move. But she still was like, I think everything's okay.
Oh wow, yeah. That's really bad. And a lot of times it's so funny that a lot of people try to stay for the children, where in actuality, if it's that bad, that is not healthy for the children. And if they're telling you that, then it's time to make some moves.
Yeah, that's like a whole other long, detailed
Right.
conversation. So we talked about how people really have to come to terms with making that move, and it's a big move. It's one of the most stressful things that anyone could go through, whether you're divorcing toxic or just even a normal divorce.
Right.
But one thing that I noticed with our clients who are early in the process is that there's a difference between men and women coming to terms with the fact that it's actually over. Can you share what you have seen from a lawyer's perspective on this?
Right. And I looked this up when I was preparing for this, and I saw that 70% of divorces, at least here in the US, are filed by women. So I think,
Really?
yes. So I think a lot of men can kind of go through the motions, do what they feel they need to do to keep the family intact. And a lot of times it's women who've decided, no more, I'm done. This is what we're going to do. Mm-hmm.
Wow. Yeah. So, not that this connects to that question, but let's talk a little bit about women, because I think there are certain groups, especially on social media, who think that only men are abusers and refer to all abusers as male, which we think is very sexist and unfair.
Right.
Just because someone's more vocal doesn't mean that something doesn't exist.
Right.
So, can you talk a little bit about what you see in terms of women being toxic? Because I think a lot of men are afraid to speak about anything because they feel like they won't be believed.
Right. No, I agree with you. It's not just men that are toxic. And in the divorce space, we've really seen toxic women, and women wait maybe more sneaky with their toxic, but a lot of times women hide behind children. They will try to align themselves with children. They will try to make the children choose which parent they're going to side with. I see that type of behavior more in women than I have with men. A lot of times men, and again, this is just my experience, so I'm not stereotyping, just what I've seen in my office. A lot of times men do that with money. Then they want to support, even though their spouse may have been a stay-at-home parent for years. They want to stay in the position of power, although the relationship is ending. So there is toxic in both spouses, or women and men, or husband and wife, or whatever the arrangement is. But I've seen it show up in different ways.
Yeah, 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 for sure. Again, like another huge conversation if we just focused on that. All right. So another thing is there's some debate about when is the proper time to contact an attorney. And that's a question that comes up all the time with people at the beginning. I know for myself, I was like, well, I don't want to waste anyone's time. So I want to wait till I'm really, really ready to go. And then, of course, it took 2 years to get to that point, from knowing the marriage was over to actually contacting an attorney. But what do you think about that? When should someone contact a divorce attorney?
I think it really depends on the individual, because some people will contact us right when they're, it's becoming a topic, when they're considering the possibility. They will contact us to make sure their retirement is intact, or different issues that relate to them individually, just so they know. So sometimes that actually changes their strategy. And some people decide, oh, maybe this isn't for me right now, or maybe I should do this right away, depending on that initial conversation. Some people don't contact us until they've been served, until they have the documents in hand. We actually had someone contact us this week. His response is due on Friday. So it just really depends on the individual, and, as you said, your comfort level in speaking to an attorney. I know that in itself can be extremely intimidating. If you've never had a legal issue or had to talk to an attorney, that can be really challenging.
Yeah. And speaking of that, and I know we didn't talk about this earlier, but as an attorney meeting someone for the first time, are there certain questions or certain, like one or two questions that someone should make sure to ask you?
Probably, what is my litigation strategy? How do I practice? Because in family law, you don't want anyone that tells you, oh, we're going to win. I promise you this is going to happen. We're going to go after them. Especially if we're in this space, a toxic space, that is not okay. That's just going to cause you a lot of pain and cost you a lot of money. Who works in my office? Who is going to be handling my file? Because a lot of times paralegals help us draft the documents, that sort of thing. We review it, and then we do some of the bigger aspects of the case. And sometimes people aren't aware of kind of what that looks like. And then get a realistic understanding on how long the process is going to take. Although in California, there is a mandatory 6-month waiting period, that doesn't mean your case is going to be done in 6 months.
Yeah.
That just means period. And what is the difference in price if the parties are agreeing to terms versus we're going to court? I know some people are really, really blown away that, yes, we charge for everything that we do in the office. And so I think, you know, everyone should understand it is a business. So attorneys are going to charge for their time. They're going to charge when you call and talk to them 20, 30 minutes about what's going on. So I think everyone should have a really, really good understanding of how that office works and make sure that it's a good fit for your particular case.
Yeah, I know billing is something that we say should be one of the first things you ask about, because people are shocked to hear around, most lawyers we know bill in 6-minute
Right.
increments.
Right.
And to read your email costs money, like to get someone to pull up your file and for you to review the file, that costs money also. So it's not just the actual time that you're interacting with your clients, it's the background stuff. And of course, we know one of the biggest expenses is preparing for trial, right?
Oh, yes. That's a huge expense. And when you go to a settlement conference or something along those lines, the judge will tell you, how much are you willing to spend? How much did you put aside? And I often say in my consultations, you can either pay me or your college tuition for your children. That's what it sometimes comes down to, depending on the conflict of the parties.
Yeah, I know my own divorce attorney, after, you know, as it got to be the year, because in Connecticut, they set a year deadline from when papers are filed where there's going to be a trial date. Right. And so we were getting closer and closer and closer, and nothing was happening despite all attempts. And my lawyer's like, well, think about it, because you could pay for my kid's college or your kid's college.
That's how some people have to pay us instead, but yes.
Yeah. So it's awful. Okay, so speaking of that, do you see a lot of situations where there's stops and starts, where somebody meets with you and then they act like they're going to move forward, and then you don't see them for a while and then they come back?
I think so. I think sometimes the first call is, you know, getting an understanding of what the process looks like. And it's a very, very scary time for a lot of people. So people aren't ready to move forward. And so it can take 3 or 4 or 5 times talking to me before someone will say, okay, I'm finally ready to do this. And I understand, because it's a very, very big decision to basically rearrange your whole life, the lives of your kids, your husband's or spouse's life as well. So it's a big decision. Most people, I would say it's about 50-50. 50% are ready to go forward, 50% are not.
Interesting. You know, in our book, I interviewed my former divorce attorney, who became my best friend for that year, because I did rely on him for emotional support, and I didn't check ahead of time with billing, learned from that. But anyway, like a wonderful human being, but he had known from the very beginning that mine was going to be a difficult one. And later on, after finishing and then years, you know, passed and deciding to do this book, I interviewed him and said, what were those red flags? And he said one of the things was domestic violence, because the person keeps sucking you back into the relationship, and those stops and starts really delay the process when a divorce is happening. But it's interesting that you say it's healthy, because it is normal, the way that you framed it. For people, it is a humongous decision. So it's not just domestic violence or domestic abuse, which could cause someone to not be able to make a decision. And like I said too, it took me 2 years to even figure out what to do. And I felt like I wanted to make sure my head was in the right place, and I planned stuff for my kids, and then it still was chaotic.
Right. I think it's very healthy to take your time, right? Because I can't make that decision. Your parents can't make that decision. Your sister, brother, cousin, whoever cannot make that decision for you. So for me, if it takes speaking to me 3 or 4 times to make sure that that's what you want to do, I think that's way more healthy than jumping into a situation that you're not ready for.
Right. And spending lots of money.
Wasting
lots of money. Yeah. Okay. What about when who files first? Like sometimes people get like, you need to file first, because then you have more of more power in the situation. What do you think about that? Does it matter?
I don't think it matters. I think personally, for some people, it matters to be able to say, okay, I made this step, especially if you're divorcing a toxic partner, but we can talk about the caveat of that. But sometimes that they had the strength to move forward, to do the filing. And I mean, it matters at the time of trial. Like the petitioner might go first in trial, and put on their witnesses in their case first. But ultimately, it does not matter. Some people, like I said, matters for their own self-esteem and something that they maybe really wanted to do. But in general, I haven't seen it really impact a case that it matters if one person filed or not.
All right, so that's really good to know because I think people get worried when they're the respondent instead of the
What's
plaintiff.
more,
Okay, what about
I'm sorry.
what are some of the different? Sorry, go ahead, Demetria.
I was just gonna say it's more of a surprise when you're the respondent if you're not expecting it. So I think that's part of it. But other than that, once you get over the sting that you're the respondent, I don't think it matters as much.
Yeah. Okay. What about we just mentioned how it's normal it's normal even in a normal divorce to have fits and starts.
Yes.
But what are some differences that you see with a toxic divorce versus a normal divorce?
Toxic divorce, I've seen people will just come in guns blazing. So they not only file the petition, they'll file an emergency order. They'll make all these allegations. You might have an emergency order, a domestic violence restraining order hearing, everything all at once. Then they're going to show up to court. They're going to look great. They're going to smell great. They're going to want to be friends with everyone. And you're going to be wondering, what the hell is going on? But that's what they do. They know how to align themselves with what they want. And so you might start off looking like the bad guy. You just kind of have to take a breath. Excuse me. Align yourself with someone that really knows what they're doing in this space and get ready for battle because it will be a battle.
Oh, don't we know it? Okay, is there, let me think. I want you to say more about it. I want you to give me more things that you see because I know that our people get really scared when the other person almost seems like they're being believed and they come out often not just with all these motions, but a lot of false allegations and people get scared.
Right. A lot of false allegations, but what I've seen, the party that was not prepared for what's to come, what they do is start throwing around, oh, my spouse is a narcissist, or they have these mental challenges. And so you're kind of confirming what the other person is saying because you naming someone a narcissist or someone that's toxic, you're not addressing the issues.
Right.
So like maybe you are crazy. Maybe they are correct. I think it's very, very, very important to stay on topic. And a lot of times, don't label someone a narcissist. Explain the behavior. Like, this behavior is concerning to me. This is concerning to me. This is why I did what I did. And like I said, it's extremely important to align yourself with someone that can walk you through this process, understanding that it is a process and it 9 times out of 10 is going to be a battle, and take one thing at a time. It's really, really hard to swallow the whole divorce in one bite. It's step by step by step. And I think if you take it that way, it's way easier the process and get through. And it is a process. So you do have to go through it. And it's a lot, but we try to manage it by doing it step by step by step. So you're not, completely overwhelmed by what's to come.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you see, because we do, the other side is attracted to certain attorney personality types?
Absolutely. Like, if you want to do more of an amicable divorce, you're going to be attracted to a different attorney type. But the toxic partner, they're going to go get someone that's just as toxic, that can kind of carry out their agenda and do what they need them to do. So it's not uncommon, and you can't really get afraid by that. You kind of have to take a step back and know how to kind of counter that.
Yeah. So you as an attorney, like, how do you deal with a toxic attorney on the other side who is really, really difficult to work with, who doesn't tell the truth, that keeps bullying your client and just relentless torture?
A lot of times you have to really disengage and decide what you're going to address and what you're not going to address. A lot of the times courts understand they're going to have a side, you're going to have a side. So a lot of those things you cannot get sucked in, because that is part of the plan, to suck you in, to take you off your game, to get you all riled up so they can turn around and say, oh, look, they are crazy because look how they're acting. So the more you can disengage and only address what is extremely important and what you need to address, the better off the case will go, for you at least.
Yeah, I mean, that's something we talk about with our clients in terms of getting ready to present well. We say your goal is to be as calm as possible.
Right.
But for someone to say calm down, that's inflammatory because that's just insensitive. But the way to keep someone calm is to have them very focused and organized, so they understand the process and they understand what to expect, and they know the other side's going to come at them and
Right.
attack, knowing that it's specifically to knock them off their game, to make them cry or lose their temper so that they can claim they're an unfit parent or an addict or whatever else. They could prepare for it properly and be like, here it comes, I'm ready, I know how I'm going to answer it properly,
right,
calmly, and to keep the spotlight on the issue rather than all these crazy accusations.
Right.
But I know sometimes our clients will say, well, you know, my ex was saying, the lawyer was saying all kinds of things and my lawyer wasn't even defending me. What do you have to say to that?
Well, they were. They know, if they know what they're doing, they address the right points, right? Because courts don't want to see a cat fight. They don't want to see both parties start throwing mud to see what sticks. And I think you're actually more persuasive if the other party is acting that way and you're not, and you're really addressing the facts and what's before the court. Because we have to remember, in each court, at least here in California, the court might have anywhere from 15 to 20 matters on calendar each day. So they don't want to sift through all the mud slinging to decide what you want them to do. So the more concise you are, the more you can present your case that way, despite what your ex is doing, I think you come out on top.
Yeah, I mean, the image that we always use, because Chris, my partner, loves football. We say, imagine it's the Super Bowl and you paid $1 million for a 30-second commercial. You need to use those 30 seconds properly. Like, you don't want to have all kinds of other things. And they're like, I'm done.
Right. And then your attorney kind of looks silly too if they are getting involved and not, kind of removing that mudslinging out of the documentation, because you're essentially slowing the court process. If, you're getting too bogged down in this is what they did to me, because court doesn't care.
Right.
Unless.
Right. And then that's a big thing to reiterate. Listen, they don't care. I used to write these beautiful speeches years ago. I was all ready. I get through like 3 sentences and be like, okay, what do you need? What are you here for? I was like, but then I'd be like going from page to page. Like, I want to say this paragraph, and it was, I got a lot better as
right. See, you learn. You have to get
down
to the point, say what you want, how can the court get it to you, and is this fair for both parties?
Yeah. Always want to appear reasonable, right?
Yes.
All right. What about when someone is, so we deal with all kinds of custody cases, all of us, with our clients, you deal with your clients. And sometimes people think because they're not married that a custody case is going to be easier. Can you talk about that?
Custody cases, in my experience, are worse, right? Because that's the one issue you have to focus on. They are your children. Sometimes people are trying to use the children as pawns to kind of win over. So I think custody cases are way worse than divorce cases, because a lot of times as well, and we call them paternity cases, a lot of times they weren't together that long, so they don't know each other. So we have that on top of where are these kids going to go? They don't like each other. So I think those cases seem to be extremely more emotional and longer. They tend to be longer than the typical divorce cases.
Yeah, but I'm saying, like, say people have kids together, even if they're married or not married, does it matter? Like, it's not like, oh, because we're not married, the custody case is going to go faster or smoother, right?
No.
Okay.
And I tend, like I said, I think they go longer because of the friction of the parties, but they don't necessarily. If you agree to the terms and you guys are on,
No,
kind of solid.
No, we're not talking about people who agree.
Okay, then no.
not here ever. Okay, so what are some other ways that you see people commonly weaponize the process? You know, what we call legal abuse. How do people weaponize the legal system?
Along the lines that we talked about, the multiple court filings, we had a case where this attorney would not stop. Anything you can think of to file, and I mean anything, contempt charges, domestic violence, appeals, multiple requests for orders, you name it, they filed it. So that's one way to really knock you off your game, because if you haven't been involved in the legal system, that can be extremely overwhelming. And then the multiple letters and emails that can come day in and day out, the multiple phone calls, the driving your attorney's bill through the roof so you can't afford it and you can't have counsel, trying to align the kids with one parent and trying to manipulate the children not to like the other parent, withholding money, not so the other party doesn't feel supported. And again, like I said, the court process, the other party will come in and be extremely charming with the court clerk, sometimes even the judge, and you feel kind of left out.
Mm-hmm.
So as you see, I can go on and on and on. There are ways, but I think number one thing is to knock you off your guard, and I think that's, despite what strategy is used, that is the end game. So I think if you know that, it's way easier to prepare for that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that my ex's attorneys for all of these years have done that a judge noted in orders that I kept reiterating to all the different judges, and that the line keeps appearing in orders, is that the other side attempts to create confusion where none exists. So
Yes.
every time we'd be in there for something, they'd have some other thing that they were getting into. They'd have a witness that had nothing to do with anything. And it would take up so much time. And at the time, luckily, I've been pro se, so I was thinking, thank God I'm not paying an attorney to deal with this. This is ludicrous. Like, I can't believe how long this is taking and all the muddled, self-serving exhibits that they would produce. And I'm thinking, how is this allowed? But unless you learn to object to it, then the judge is going to look at it. Like, all of those things for me as a non-lawyer took time to be like, I have to say something. No one else is going to stand up for me, and a judge isn't going to isn't going to like argue in my favor because I'm by myself. So there's so much
I've
involved.
also seen the deposition. People love to use the deposition to get people in there and just be extremely brutal with question after question after question. 9 times out of 10 has nothing to do with the case.
Uh-huh.
So I feel like whatever strategy they can employ to knock you off, your center, that's what's going to happen. So be prepared for anything, actually.
Yeah. I've been reading a book about trauma recently, and it was saying how when you're in like that crazy state, you can't make good decisions because it's like your brain is in a fog and you're running on adrenaline.
Right.
And so if you understand that the other side is trying to get you in that state, they're going to say things to upset you, to inflame you. Like, you have to realize that that's the strategy and not take it so personally and think that's what their lawyer's doing. It's not because the lawyer loves my ex's client. It doesn't matter, but that's that lawyer's job, is to knock me off my game, is to make me freak out.
Right.
And so I have to deal with it. I have to strategize right back. How am I going to stay as calm as possible and focus?
Is very, very, very important.
Yeah. It's hard. It's really hard. And I know also with COVID and doing a lot of remote hearings where the camera's right on your face, like, I have a hard time controlling my face. Like, I roll my eyes, and we always tell people, do not roll your eyes. Don't like throw up your hand like that. That's really hard.
Oh, it is. Sometimes it's hard for me. So I totally understand, but it is important not to do those things. And I think what a lot of people do, and I think I mentioned this, is throw around the word, my ex is a narcissist, my ex is this or that. And I think sometimes that takes away from your argument, because a lot of times the judges are thinking, how do you know?
Yeah.
I think it's extremely important to stay focused on the behavior and don't necessarily try to diagnose your experience, at least not for the court experience.
Yeah. I mean, we always tell our clients, like, even if your state, I mean, luckily your state, California, my state, Connecticut, we have these coercive control laws, but it's just a word, it's a label. Like most people have no idea what that
Right,
means. But to focus on patterns of behavior over time and the impact it has on a situation. So if it's
right,
a custody case, it doesn't matter if your ex actually is a narcissist or not, but does their behavior actually impact their parenting?
right,
Because there is an Americans with Disabilities
right,
Act, which protects people with mental illness.
right.
So just having that label, that doesn't guarantee you full custody at all, right?
And you kind of lose your credibility, unfortunately, right? So we understand it, and I love to speak about it, but a lot of judges don't. And so if you start throwing around terms, or maybe they've been called a narcissist, so you have to be careful with how that going to trigger or not the judge. So you have to be really careful on how you present your case to the court, although you might be dealing with, a toxic partner.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting. I've never heard someone say that before about how a judge might be triggered. That is because there's a lot of ego
A
going
lot
on all over the place.
of, of ego.
Yeah. All right. So let's say that I'm at the end of my 2 years of realizing I am in a toxic relationship and I know it's going to be a bad one. I know it's going to be a difficult divorce or separation or custody battle. How can I best prepare for that? We talked a little bit about mindset, but what else?
I think it's very, very important at the onset to realize divorce attorneys are not your friends and they're not your therapists. So we handle the business of the uncoupling or, the termination of your relationship. So if you feel you need additional emotional support or you need to vent and get, have someone to help you through that process, I think it's extremely important to form a support system. Your divorce attorney is part of that, but they can't be your full support system. And then understand that this is going to be a battle. So start to sit with, oh my God, take this step by step, day by day. Don't try to envision the entire divorce process because I think that is, more stressful.
Mhm.
And then start getting your documents together. Does a house need to be sold? What assets are there? What information do I have to kind of make this kind of a smoother process? Please don't talk about this with your children. Children do not want to be in the middle. They do not. I don't care how aligned you think they are, how mature you think they are. Children do not. There's been so many studies, so many documentaries to show they do not want to be in the middle. And assure them that this is not their fault. Because a lot of children try to fix it, want mommy and daddy to be happy. So make sure that they understand that it's not their fault, and then don't try to do the work for your attorney either. You hire an attorney to assist with the process. So please follow their counsel. If you feel that they can't counsel you, then it might be time to get another attorney. But it is a journey, it is a process. Create your support system and good luck, really.
Yeah, yeah. And now, another question which I thought we were going to talk about the whole time, but I still want to make sure we do talk about is I'm leaving this relationship and it's taking forever. And how am I supposed to live if I don't have any money? What am I supposed to do?
Thank you for that question because a lot of people call me and they're like, I'm leaving tomorrow. And I'm like, well, what's your practical plan? Right? We can file for divorce all day long, but where are you going to live? How much money do you have? Do you have a car? Where are the kids going to school? So I think it's extremely important before you even get into the filing of the divorce to make sure that there's a practical plan in place. Are you going to stay in the same house? Who is moving out? Who is paying for that? Because if not, then you're kind of setting yourself up for even more uncertainty and more panic if you don't have answers to those questions. So know that if you want to file for support, if you want to file for attorney fees, that's going to take at least 60 days, sometimes longer than that. So what's going to happen for those 60 days if there's no support? Is there someone that's going to lend you money? Have you withdrawn half of the bank accounts? Like what is going to happen? So I think it's, to me, more important to have that in place than actually filing for the divorce.
Yeah, you're making me think of as part of my domestic violence advocacy training, we learned about making safety plans or exit plans.
Mm-hmm.
And that's such an important part of it is figuring out how can you afford to get away?
Right.
Do you need to borrow money? Like you said, do you need to sock away cash? Do you need to use gift cards? But something like where are you going to move when you
Right.
get out? A lot of people think, okay, I want a divorce and now I want my ex to move out because it's my house, even though it's not really their house, but they're
Right.
like, that why doesn't the other person move out?
Right. Right.
And they get like, how could a judge let us stay in the same house? Because you're really lucky if that other person moves out because
Right.
it's really expensive to move out, right?
Right. Especially here in California, a lot of people stay in the same house while they go through the process. Some people opt to leave, but don't assume that the other party is going to leave, and make sure you have, as you said, your exit plan that works for you and your family.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So did I forget anything,
I
Demetria?
think we covered it all. That
I
was a
know.
lot.
I know. So again, how can people find you? Where are you again? And
Um, I'm everywhere, Lisa, but primarily social media at Demetria.Graves ESQ. I also have a podcast where we do talk a lot about the different topics as they relate to family law, and that is at Legally Uncensored.
yes, and I'm so excited because Chris and I are going to be on your
Yes,
podcast.
you are. I'm so excited too.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. I'm glad we finally got to do this, and I'm sure this is not going to be the last conversation.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you.
Talk
Bye.
later.
Bye.
Bye.